It's good to have the familiar faces and some new friends as well. Today is a little bit different because we are streaming this conversation live. We're really excited about that, so that other people who maybe weren't able to attend can join in on the conversation. So a little bit about the conversation. I apologize to those of you who can't hear back too. We decided to have it in the kitchen because all of the best conversations, at least in my experience, happen in the kitchen with your friends and family. You're really close to each other, chowing down, and just enjoying yourself. So that's why we were really excited to host it here in our space, in our kitchen. We're really excited to have Bill Strickland of Manchester Bidwell Corporation with us, the CEO, and also our own CEO, Tiziana Dearing. Thanks so much. For those of you out there who are watching live, the hashtag, if you want to tweet something from the conversation, is Rising Class. So with that, I'll turn it over to Imari to start the conversation.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our conversations about rising. And everyone should have a cup of coffee, a diet soda, or whatever their comfort food is. So we have chicken soup for the soul, and so we have some conversations for the soul to join that chicken soup. And so I'm lucky today. In my day job, I get to sit with people and talk about what I do. And part of that day job, I also get to sit with friends and have conversations that get to be live for the whole world to hear. So I want to thank you for joining us. And again, if you are joining us on the live stream, you could tweet. The hashtag is Rising Class, hashtag Rising Class, and you can join the conversation online. We will be asking if some of the questions that you ask us from Twitter, and if you guys are in here who are joining us live, who are in the kitchen conversation, also feel free to tweet the conversation and join the conversation in that way. If you guys remember the format, we're in the kitchen, so that in the kitchen anything goes. It's a conversation. We're in a round table. While everyone's not sitting at the table, everyone is here at the table. And so it's not a sit and lecture style, but really a style where everyone can participate. And so a couple of different things we're learning each and every time. If you have a question, if you could just tell us what your name is and ask the question. And what we're going to also ask our two folks today to not to turn around and acknowledge the person, but face the direction of the camera, because we're going to look in the direction of the kitchen. Bill, I'm going to ask you to cuddle up with me a little bit closer on this side.
That's the camera?
That's the camera. This is really good. So we'll be cuddling up on this side. So again, please, if you have a question, again, this is a flowing conversation. Just let us know your name. I know we have a lot of friends who've been here 2 and 3 times already. Just remind us what your name is. And if we could ask our speakers to just acknowledge that, but speak facing this way so everyone could hear the conversation. So I'm going to introduce in form of some quick bullets and bios of my two friends who are joining us today. I'm not going to read their bios because I could spend the next hour just reading their bios and their list of boards and accomplishments. So I'm just going to do bullets. Just going to introduce where they work and some of the things they're involved in when they're not involved in the work of their organizations. So we have my friend to the left who's a guest in our home, and I've had an opportunity to be a guest in his home, Bill Strickland. I'm just going to read a couple of highlights. Bill is as you already know, the president and CEO of Manchester Bidwell, and really the founder of this national initiative. He is the author of the book Make the Impossible Possible. He's on a few boards, to name a couple of them. He's on the National Endowment of the Arts Board. He's on the White House Council for Community Solutions. He's the founder of the Grammy-winning MCG Jazz Festival, one of the most successful jazz festivals in the world. He's a trustee of the University of Pittsburgh, and he kind of got one of these small awards called a MacArthur Genius Award, which means he's a little bit smart. So they say. I stole a little bit of your thunder, Bill. I thought it tickled me to death. So we want to welcome Bill Strickland, who flew in today from Pittsburgh. Thank you for joining us, Bill. Okay. And to my right, I have the fortune in my home life to have a very loving and caring wife and 2 small children. And at work, I have the fortune of having a lovely, caring work wife. And we don't have any small children, but we have an incredible team of champions and leaders that we get to work together with. And that's Tiziana Dearing. Some of the accomplishments, not in a comprehensive list, but a couple of things that Tiziana has done. She's most recently, before joining Boston Rising, she was the president of Catholic Charities, one of the largest social service agencies in our city, and one of the most impactful ones as well. She was the director of the Hauser Center at Harvard, which means she's kind of smart. She's on the board of the Harvard Cooperative Society, the Rappaport Institute, the Marion Jasper Whiting Foundation, and she holds a master's degree in public policy from the Kennedy School, and she is a proud graduate of the University of Michigan.
Blue.
Please put your hands
Sorry,
together for
it's reflex.
she's really good. I had to say the Michigan part because I made the mistake of confusing Michigan with Michigan State once, and I know, yeah, I know. It was hot water. And so, as you guys know from our previous conversations, they're informal, and I really want to start us off with one thought, one conversation, and just feel free to jump in, and if you have any comments or you want to add to the conversation. And so, as you know, these are conversations about rising, and what we do in these conversations is talk about the truisms of chasing the American dream. And so here are some truisms that we at Boston Rising have uncovered. When most people tell their stories of how they got here, how they got to the place where they feel comfortable or in their road to prosperity and raising their families, their jobs, they talk about three things. They talk about the jobs that they had and the opportunities those jobs provided them with learning and to make a good living. They talked about the education that they've experienced, both in what they learned, who they met in their educational journey, and how it prepared them for the world. And they also talk about the connections that they have. The neighbor who gave them the first job mowing the grass, the person that their father or mother or uncle knew that provided them that first job, the mentor or the mentoring relationship they had with a professor or someone professionally that provided an opportunity for them. So those are some truisms that we uncovered around people chasing and pursuing the American dream. But there are also some truths about those things. The truth about those things is that they're not accessible to all people, and there are roadblocks that prevent every single American in this country from achieving or you having those tools at their disposal to reach the American dream. Some people don't see and cannot access education as a tool for rising. Some people don't see and cannot access social connections and mentoring as a tool for rising. And some people cannot access and cannot see a job as a tool for rising. And so we want to uncover some of those truths while we uncover various leaders' journey to rising. And so I want to start off with one question to uncover some of these truths and celebrate each of our journey in rising. We all face pivotal moments in our journey to rising and chasing the American dream. When you think about how you got here and you think about your pursuit of the American dream, can you think about or can you reflect on some key times or some key moments that shaped your story on rising? And I'll let whoever wants to start.
Well, it's funny because I can think of key moments and they're different at different times in my life, right? But one in particular that I think about was the day the idea of becoming the first woman president of Catholic Charities was first introduced to me. And I was sitting in my office at the Hauser Center, and a longtime friend and mentor who was doing the job at the time came in and sat down and said, basically straight up, "What would you think about taking my job?" And it was a really big jumble of thoughts for me at the time, but part of what was remarkable to me about it, he's a academic, a scholar, former MacArthur genius himself, a priest, whole bunch of things. And I'd kind of thought for a long time, I'd kind of like to be this guy when I grow up, except I'm not a genius, I'm a female, I'm not a priest, I'm not an academic, right? And I couldn't ever see a way to be like this person that I thought was living in the world in a way that I would like to be able to live in the world. And at the moment that he said that to me, I realized he thought I could be that, right? That this person who in my life I wanted to be like and thought I never could, thought I didn't have any of the building blocks to be like, it was completely obvious to him that I could in fact not only be like him, but take over something he was actually actively doing at the time. And while in the moment I had a jumble of thoughts, what lasted over time was the remarkable moment where somebody that I believed in me, had faith in me, and was willing to give me a chance to take a really big leap based on pure faith in me. And you can never substitute the confidence that somebody else's faith in you like that gives you, right? Without that moment of the confidence that's only, in some ways, there are moments where actually only someone else can do that. We are such a self-sufficient country, right? It is my bootstraps, it is my ability, it is my confidence. Actually, sometimes it's not, right? And for someone else to take that step that put a whole new piece of confidence I couldn't supply to myself in was a remarkable moment in my life. So if I were going to pick one for that reason, I'd pick that one.
Yeah, I guess one specific moment, and I start off every speech I've given and will give with the same story. A public school teacher, a guy named Frank Ross, and he happened to be the art teacher in our high school. And I was not an artist, and happened to see this guy make a big ceramic bowl one day. The school happened to have a potter's wheel, probably by accident. It just happened to be in that school, and he happened to be a ceramic artist, so you sit down the wheel and he made this big old bowl. And it was one of those life experiences that was profound, because I'd never imagined clay. Nobody in my neighborhood did anything to do with pottery. I'd never seen it done, and it was so, I wasn't prepared for the image, and it caught me off guard, and it was transforming. And I literally, he turned around and says, can I help you? I said, what is that you just did, man? He said, oh, that's ceramics. I said, well, I want to learn how to do that. He says, well, get your homeroom teacher that says you can come here and I'll teach you. So I cut all my classes for the remaining 2 years of high school. And I gave the teachers the classes I was cutting pottery, and they gave me passing grades after I got out of the place. And Frank says, you're too smart to die. I am leaving this school at graduation, and I'm not going to let you die on the streets like your friends. And he hounded me until I filled out a college application to the University of Pittsburgh, where I entered, by the way, as a probationary student, because I'd never seen a scholastic aptitude test. So I graduated from Pitt with honors. Now I'm a trustee of the place. And I was the commencement speaker. I got up in front of 13,000 people and said, don't give up on the poor kids. They might end up being the commencement speaker. And that moment with Frank opened up a whole life conversation that is playing itself out literally to this day.
Bill, you mentioned, you mentioned when Frank said to you that he didn't want you to die like some of your friends on the street, some of the people that you grew up with. One of the things that we know about people trying to achieve the American dream and pursue rising is that we have to leave people behind. There's these hard decisions, and particularly for women, particularly for people of color, where they have to make tough choices around divorcing their community in order to achieve success. Can you talk about key moments? Can either one of you talk about key moments where you had to make choices, tough choices and some difficult decisions in order to live the life that you or someone else wanted you or expected you could do to achieve your dream?
Well, I don't know if I totally agree with that statement. I don't think you have to leave your neighborhood, for example, behind. I think you have to change your ideas and your behavior. You can stay physically where you are, but your mind's got to go somewhere else. And so what I figured out through trial and error was to define my relationship with the neighborhood in a different way that was more hopeful than pessimistic. And that what I achieved with Frank was a vision of how life could be, a whole different idea of how you understand reality. And it was that understanding that allowed me to reposition myself in my community so that I became an asset in the community rather than a liability. And I believe to the extent that this world's got a future, it's going to be because we have a lot of people, present company included, who can change their relationship to the reality that we find ourselves in this world and make a better world.
So I would come at it from a different place, and you actually said two things, Amari, and I want to address them both. The last thing you said was can you talk about times where you have to make, or you've had to make tough choices in sort of your road to rising? And the first thing that I will say is, while completely worth it, and I wouldn't trade it for the world, it's what makes me fulfilled as a human. Every day of being a working mother is a day of tiny, tough choices, in my experience. Every single day of being a working mother is a day of tiny little tough choices about how you're balancing everything that it takes to rise, to make sure that your spouse rises in the ways that he wants to make sure that your children have the world that they want to rise in. And I think about it all the time, right? So that's one thing I want to say. For me, and this is interesting, Bill, because so I'm the youngest of 9 children, 8 living. Most of my siblings are still back in Battle Creek, Michigan, where I came up. My parents were born and raised there. They never left there. He was on the football team. She was not. But they fell in love in high school. They got married. And most of my siblings have stayed there. I fell in love with a man, and we wound up in Boston. And we both thought we were coming for 4 years. When Steve and I first came out here, we thought we were coming for 4 years. But there was a world of opportunity here, and in some cases more so for Steve, who's in psychiatry and at one of the top psychiatric hospitals in the world now, and kind of where do you go from there, you know what I mean, than me. But this community held a set of opportunities to be of service in ways that we couldn't at home. And I remember the day that I came to Boston, I had a little moving truck because I didn't have much stuff, and my brother was driving and I was in the seat, and we were in my mom's driveway, my mom and dad's driveway in Battle Creek, and my mom was just crying, saying goodbye. And I remember thinking, Mom, it's only for 4 years. And that was in 1994. And right around 7 or 8 years ago, we were having a conversation one day it's a little bit hard to talk about, having a conversation one day on the phone, and she said in the middle of the conversation, "You're never coming home, are you?" And I paused for a minute and I said, "No, Mom, I'm not. I'm never coming home." And realized in that moment that to live the life that I wanted to live, to have the opportunities to be of service, and to support a person I loved, to have the opportunities to be of service in the way that he wanted, I had to actually make a choice that I was never going home. And for me, that was a very profound moment. And I realized I'd made the choice a long time ago. And it wasn't until she asked me that I had to face up to it and own that that was the choice I had made about my family and my community. And I had a brother who was a mayor of that city, a brother who was an editor of that paper, a brother who was the head of the Carpenters Union, a sister who was the head of the Chamber of Commerce, or the Real Estate Association at one point. I mean, we were in that community, and I was never going home.
Let me reflect on that, because I've spent 64 years and 6 months in one neighborhood, and I've never left. I literally was born there and I'll die there. I have no intention of going anywhere. But my relationship to that neighborhood has changed.
Yeah.
I'm not the guy I was when I was 6 years old and so on. And what has changed is my perception and understanding of how that place could become different than it was when I grew up. And so I've been there, and it hit me one time. I grew up in a neighborhood. Back then, there was Slovaks and Germans and Polish folks and this and that. And we didn't call it cultural diversity, we called it a neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And there were 6 foreign languages spoken in elementary school. And then the riots came, and white folks left, and the poor black folks moved in, and the thing kind of went like that. And it's starting to slowly pull itself back out. And one day I was sitting in my office in fairly modern times, in this fabulous building that we built and this and that. And somebody said, "Why are you pushing so hard? You built this center, you got a national reputation, you won the MacArthur." And I realized that I want my old neighborhood back. That what I've been pushing for is to get back to my memories and my experiences as a little kid.
Yeah.
That I want the Italian family and the Slovak family and the black family to be united in a way that talks about neighborhood and family and opportunity and safety. And I'm relentless in the pursuit of trying to find that space again, even if I have to rebuild the neighborhood to get there. So that was a very important moment for me.
So as a child, because part of what's remarkable, I think, about what you said is, you think back now and it was valuable to you, but as a child, it
Right.
was valuable to you.
Oh, yeah.
What was speaking to you as a child, right? What did you hold in your heart about that as a child?
Safety, emotional safety. There were people around me who loved me. Not only my immediate family was the whole neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not talking about some romantic vision of whatever. That's actually how we lived.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand that there was any way differently to live than to care about your neighbors who cared about you. And we all went to the school picnic together, that sort of thing. And I remember as a little kid watching the Greek Orthodox day of festivals, and the women in their bare feet, and the priests with these big high candles. That's what I saw as a 6-year-old. And I thought, this is my neighborhood. What a cool neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Well, those celebrations and festivals are long gone from my neighborhood. What was replaced was the riots and guys getting shot, and public housing projects, and everything that had everything to do with violence and not celebration. And I want the celebration back. Not just for me, for my kids, for everybody else's kid. This is no way to experience life in a community. And I want it so bad, I'm prepared to put my life on the line as the price to be paid for getting it.
Mm-hmm.
The intensity that children feel about the need to be loved and nurtured and cared for is deep. And a lot of what's wrong with a lot of adults is they either never had that love to begin with, or they're spending all their life trying to find it. And I recognized that in myself, and Mr. Ross recognized it in me. That he knew very clearly that I was a child with enormous potential, but who needed somebody to care about him, man. Who gave him clay and, said it was worth something and introduced me to music and so on. That what he did was very natural for him as a human being. As it turns out, when I got to know his history, because he grew up in an Italian family. And that's what they did. So it wasn't a sort of theory of education that he was presenting in the classroom. He was presenting himself as a human being. Hello? That is scalable. We're all capable of doing that. You don't have to go to school to do that.
Yeah.
You can go to a nice neighborhood and learn how to do it. And most of the mothers in my neighborhood didn't know how to do it. And most of their kids turned out to be okay.
So, I think I've become so increasingly convinced that we actually have to have a conversation about love.
Yeah.
That actually underlying all of our work, all of it, is actually just a good old-fashioned conversation about love. And that love, it's so hard to even talk about love without everything sounding like somebody's going to put it on a poster with a kitten in a guidance counselor's office, right? And I don't want to sound like that, but when I say love is actually the ultimate act of courage, okay, snapshot, kitten, set it aside. But love is actually the ultimate act of courage, because when you invite somebody in with love, it's messy, it's complicated, you're in for the long haul, life is complex. But at the root of when our work in our space is in poverty work, in changing people's minds, this is change of heart work. That's what is at the root of altering neighborhoods and altering our systems. It is change of heart work. And every major religious tradition in human history will tell you that change of heart work comes from a place of love. And we've lost, I think, to some extent, the language and the space to talk about it from that place. And we have to find a way. I'm grateful that you talk about it that way, because it is, and I'm always so sensitive, because as a woman leader, right? Oh, she's going in the touchy-feely space. She's playing the mom card. She's, and as a Catholic leader, when I was running a Catholic, oh, she's playing the Catholic card. No, it's love. It just is. And confidence comes from love, and confidence is what allows people to rise.
I know. I feel you. The reason I won the MacArthur Genius Award, I figured out the cure for spiritual cancer, basically. And I figured it out through trial and error by creating a nurturing space. And those of you know my work, there's fresh flowers in the front desk when you walk in. There's fabulous food. There's lots of sunlight, gorgeous art, motivated faculty, no metal detectors and no cameras in a tough inner city neighborhood. And we haven't had an incident in 26 years. Now, my old high school's still there, 4 blocks away, with steel doors, metal detectors, bars in the windows, and the garbage cans are chained to the wall with boat chains 4 blocks from my building. Now, I'm either the luckiest guy in Pittsburgh, or there's something about the way in which we've elected to treat these children and their parents. You can't be that lucky. That's impossible. And so what I figured out through trial and error, there's nothing wrong with the kids. The kids are fine. They started off in the exact same place that you and I did. They were just children. And somewhere along the way, they got derailed, man, because of this or that or the other thing. And what I figured out is if I could go back and recreate the emotional conditions that these children started off with, I ought to get behavior change. How did I know that? Because it happened to me with Frank Ross. That's what he did, man. The most important thing that Mr. Ross did every day was he allowed me to have a cup of coffee in the teacher's lounge with him. That doesn't seem like very much, but just that simple gesture of allowing me to be a little bit apart from the crowd and to have the chance to sit with them and learn something, that space was very special. And I said, this isn't about environment. What you got to do is change the environment. You change the environment, you can change the conversation. That's what I figured out.
You know, one of the things that we talk about at Boston Rising is we talk about quality being at the core of the human condition, and quality being a human rights issue. That when people have the opportunity for quality and the choice of quality, how they define quality, that's at the core of feeding their soul. And it sounds a lot much like both of your experiences, the quality relationships you had, the quality mentoring relationships you had, the quality experience that you're providing now. Can you talk a little bit about how you see quality having an effect on people's condition? Can you talk about some of the experiences at Manchester Bidwell? Can you talk about some of the experiences here or at charities or in your own life in which the quality of the experience made the experience?
Well, I could tell you one immediately. When you come to my center, everybody eats a gourmet meal. You got $1 million kitchen, courtesy of the Heinz Ketchup Company, and everybody in the building eats a gourmet meal, including people who think that they don't deserve one, at roughly the same price as you could eat fast food. And what we've learned is that people like the food, and then they become to expect the food as if it's a right, which it is in our school. So there's nobody on this planet that's going to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, because I've been doing this for 25 years. The public school kids called a press conference to protest the quality of the food that they were being served in the cafeteria. 7th graders. They got a big budget and a great big food program that is incapable of serving these kids decent food. I got a little budget with a very high degree of motivation to serve these kids decent food. Hello? You can't tell me that that is not scalable. Everybody can eat decent food. And the fact that they aren't tells me a whole lot about the people who are serving the food as opposed to the people receiving the food.
Yeah, I fundamentally believe that there's an inescapable relationship between quality and dignity. And I believe, for me, I always come back to the first place of human dignity, right? And that can be used pejoratively, because frankly, we tend to talk about dignity with people whose dignity we don't respect, versus understanding that we are all laden with fundamental human dignity, right? And so I want to be very clear that that's what I'm talking about. Bill Traynor, who's here in the offices right now, will talk about, transformation comes when we can create places where people can come together, bring their best stuff and exchange it. He doesn't say bring their stuff and exchange it. He says bring their best stuff. And somewhere along the way, we've lost the idea that it's your best stuff that everybody actually deserves. Everybody should get your best stuff all the time. And we make choices. We do. We have to tell ourselves the truth about this. We make choices about who gets our best stuff and who doesn't. But dignity and your best stuff are inextricably tied. And frankly, somebody stops giving me their best stuff for long enough, and enough people stop giving me their best stuff for long enough, and I'm going to stop believing I'm worth anybody's best stuff. And in that moment, I stop believing in my own dignity. And then I lose my own power. I do. I lose my own power. I can't bring my best stuff anymore when I don't think I'm worth somebody else's. And we know this in some spaces, but we've lost it in this space about work of helping people rise, helping communities discover what their full human potential is, right? And we have to come back to the place where we feel worthy of best stuff and where we know, don't bother if you're not going to bring your best. It's a little bit harder, but step up. You got one life, right? Why not spend it with your best stuff? And I'm sorry, completely inarticulate.
I think as leaders, us, we have an obligation to do something that's within our understanding. For example, one of my favorite stories is I have this wonderful space in Pittsburgh, for poor folks, and it's a wonderful place, and it's wonderful people, and it's a big deal these days, and lots of people have heard about it. And one of the features of our culture is that we have fresh flowers in our building every day. Every day. And we had a bunch of principals come visit my school from, our high school principals. And they're walking around with their mouth open, and this is fabulous, and this is gorgeous, and this and this and that. We were really touched by those flowers. We were really blown away by those flowers. How'd they get there? I said, well, I got in my car and I went out to the greenhouse and I bought them and I brought them back and I put them there. You don't need a task force or a study group to buy flowers for your kids, man. Now, that is within our capability to do, man. Hello? You can buy a bouquet of flowers for your kids. And while that will not cure cancer or make all the problems of the world go away, it is a step in the right direction. And it's the 1,000 steps like that that get you to your goal. But you can do that on Monday. And you don't need to go to school to do it, man. That's all within our capability to provide. And you don't have to be a guru either. Okay, that's not a requirement to do good things. What is a requirement is the emotional need to share, which obviously, she has and he has and I have, and that's why we're here today.
Yeah, I want to open it up, and I think we got a good conversation rolling.
So I completely agree with everything both of you are saying, but what I'm really curious, and maybe to start with you, Bill, because I believe about creating environments, but I also know I can't have everybody come into an environment that I've helped create. So one of the things I'm really curious about is how to take certain behaviors of being human. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I think we mostly act out of fear in our society. And so we actually have to be intentional to be human, which is, I understand that sounds weird. But do you, each of you, have stories around how you try to be human when you're going into other spaces? I mean,
Well, I am spending probably the rest of this life building spaces in other communities. So, you could say, well, quit while you're ahead. You built a cool space, you got the MacArthur, you're eating all right. Get up from the game, man. I said, no, I'm a type A, I can't quit while I'm ahead, and I'm going to play this hand out. So if it worked in Pittsburgh, it ought to work in Boston and Cincinnati and Chicago and Columbus and Bogota, Colombia, and San Jose, Costa Rica, and northern Japan, because fundamentally we're all built the same. So don't change what got you here. Stay with what you know. So you go into a new space, and the first thing you say is, punch some holes in the wall, let's get some light in this place. Let's go find out who's got the flowers, who's making the great food. Let's begin to change the conversation, even if it's just at a microscopic level, because you've got to stay with what got you here, because that's what people are relying on to come from you as the leader. Go with what you know.
There's like 800 different things I would love to answer about that, but I think I'll tell a little anecdote actually in my answer to it, which is one thing we don't often talk about a lot, but is as a woman, there's a little bit of a constant state of threat, right? You're traveling alone, You don't want them at the hotel desk to say what your room number is out loud because you're traveling alone and there are 10 men standing in the lobby, right? You're out alone walking somewhere and you feel just a little bit more vulnerable. You feel just a little bit more exposed. And very early on, I was traveling in some places, both foreign and domestic, where other people were very afraid for me, right, that I was alone in those places. And what I learned very quickly was the closest path, the fastest path to feeling safe was being open and friendly. So if I was somewhere where I didn't feel safe and I thought there was a person near me who was scary to me, I would turn and be friendly. Hi, how are you? Hey, can you help me out? I don't know where I'm going. And I swear to God, every single time, in my experience, every time, it doesn't matter what country I've been in, what city I've been in, the response that I get is, you can see it on people's faces. This is a person who thinks I have of value. They think I'm somebody who can offer help, right? They think that I am somebody, so I make myself vulnerable. I assume that the position that they are coming from is a place where they have something of help to offer. And every time, in fact, what is in fact the case is they are somebody who is in a position of help to offer, right? And people love being given the benefit of the doubt and the faith that that's where they want to come from. Because the fact is, that is where most people want to come from the vast majority of the time. And it has taught me such an important life lesson that when I go into someone else's space, I will choose to be vulnerable. And I will assume every single time that they have things to offer and that that's the first place to encounter them.
I would like to respond to that statement by talking to the men in the room. I think it's very, very important that we begin to demonstrate that we have the ability to feel things deeply,
Mm-hmm.
and to show it in a way that's not that's unencumbered. However, we've got this thing turned around. There's this perception that to be masculine means you can't be generous and gentle and thoughtful and so forth. I think that's a big mistake. I think it's a big mistake for men. I think it's a big mistake for young men who are coming along, that we've got to join forces with the feminine principle to change this conversation. Now, I'm this big 6'4" guy, and I flew jets for a living. I do all this masculine stuff. That's cool. But I'm not the least bit uncomfortable buying flowers for my kids or setting a meal for these children, because I want them to understand that gentleness and warmth and affection is not just feminine.
Yeah.
It's a human opportunity. Yeah. And I think we're ultimately designed that way. When babies are born into the world, the first thing that their mothers do is the arts. They sing, they rhyme, they draw, they clap, and then we take it away from them when they're 5 years old and wonder why there's something wrong with the kids, right? And the men particularly are suffer because of this deprivation. And my centers are deliberately saying, we want everybody to know that the men and women who are in this place are emotionally built about the same and care for each other with similar characteristics. And it's not, there's something wrong with you if you don't feel things, not if you do. That's a very important principle, and we've got a lot of work to do on it, I believe.
I want to just take a pause there and maybe have one of the men in the room react to that statement. Are there any thoughts or reactions around the difficulties of that? Ray.
My name is Ray Porch, and I'm director and coordinator at University High School in Boston, which is an alternative ed high school. And my interaction with youth between 17 and 21 years old on a daily basis, male and female, and to hear the two of you talk about the relationships that you cultivated and also how those relationships have impacted your lives. And I think about every day the young people that I interact with and how many of them don't have access to those relationships. And so my interaction with them is a constant process of where you begin, where the middle is, and where does it go from there. And some of them don't start off in a positive place because you're trying to show them or expose them to love in some instances that they've never seen before.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now your challenge changes. The conversation changes because you got to lay a foundation for that. Make sure you give them as much information as you can. Make sure they understand the information, and then try to go from there. And so when I hear that, it just brings me back to today, this morning before I came here, and I'm running a little behind, sweating, because these things keep coming up with our young people, and our young men in particular, and it's a challenge.
Yeah.
I'm a father of one 13-year-old daughter, and I think about how much affection and love and understanding I show her daily, and how for me that's not work. And so when I come to work, I try to mimic that same love and understanding. And she's grown with it her whole life, so she's acclimated to it, what it looks like, and so she knows what she's getting. A lot of our youth, 16 and 21, don't know what they're getting. And they've seen so much of the other side of it. Sometimes you giving them love and affection looks like something totally different.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's like a foreign language, even though we were born with the capacity to speak that language. I believe that's directly proportional to our willingness to make these relationships permanent, not transitory.
Yeah.
As much as you all will go to your grave defending your children, I believe we have an obligation to go to our grave defending people who don't have the ability to love and be affectionate. So that if we begin to stir into that pot and you begin to bring people back to life, you have an obligation to stay with them. Because that vocabulary and that experience takes a long time to develop and to be implemented in a personality. As Mr. Ross said, I'm not going to let you die in the streets, man. He could have said, it's been great. God bless you. He's good luck.
Right.
He said, no, I'm going to know you're okay. As it turns out, that turned out to be a lifelong relationship with him. I will put money that the kids that you're beginning to impact, they're lucky to have you, are going to be very excited about knowing you, but I think they're going to be even more excited to know that you won't ever leave them.
My name is Leroy Ashwood, and I'm CEO of an organization named Brave for Veterans. We are trying to create jobs for veterans returning from Iraq, Afghanistan. Steve Bowman, to my right, is my partner, and I'm here today for a number of reasons, but I'm happy to be able to listen to both of your stories because I find myself in them. I left my community a while back, but that same community is hopeful of being another expansion site for Mr. Strickland's program. The question I have when Bill talked about Mr. Ross, I believe in your book you mentioned that story in the chapter called The Power of Passion.
Yeah.
And what I have been listening to, I guess, is a composite of what could be the answers to how you can help somebody find their passion. But we will be dealing with people who will be returning from an experience where passion has been contorted.
Yeah, sure.
And to the extent that they may be stuck, and we have a business partner in Curtis Odom who is publishing a book called Stuck in the Middle, where people might go and find some ideas about how to get themselves on track at different stages of their lives. He's a 10-year veteran. As you talked about the power of passion in that chapter, Bill, how, and Tiziana, how can you maybe give us an idea of how to help a person find that passion? We talked about the environment, we talked about the stimulus, and we talked about so on and so on. But everybody can't be all of what they want to be. We here in this room particularly know that the realities of the new world is such that some things have gone away and will never come back. So is there a fundamental formula for helping somebody to become extremely passionate and therefore successful in their rise to their sustainability in this new world that we find ourselves in?
You want? I think that passion is almost always triggered when people find themselves in a moment of usefulness or service. what tends to spark and ignite people is a moment when they've actually been useful to someone else, useful to a cause, or of service to someone else. And you and I were talking for a couple minutes before we officially started today about the role of formalizing roles of service, right? And in our communities and in our young people. And I absolutely believe that making service something that is a given, right? Creating opportunities for people to have service and be of service. But I would encourage people to try an experiment. Go out over the next couple of weeks and talk to 10 people about who are passionate about something, how that happened. And I guarantee you, at least 8 of them, it will be, well, there was this moment and I helped somebody, right? Or then I saw that, gosh, if we did this, we could make this happen, right? We are, I believe, inherently as a species, we got to remember we're a species, right? And inherently as a species, we are a pack. And when we are of service and people recognize that service and we can find value in ourselves that way. And God knows we need service in this country. We got a lot of problems that we could be solving with a service mentality. And there's just massive opportunity there.
I believe too that we carry around the capacity for passion and capability inside of us. The trick is to get you in a position where you can show it. Not that you have to create it. I think it's already there. And it hasn't been extinguished in Afghanistan. It may have been brutalized in Afghanistan, but the core soul or being of these folks that you're working with is still there. Brutalized, beaten up, tarnished, but not extinguished. And the trick is to put them in an environment that begins to allow them to heal and to realize their own potential. I continue to be amazed at the capacity of human beings to recover themselves from difficulty in which you have counted them out. Every day of my life I see this in my work. That somehow, some way, with just a little bit of encouragement, they spring right back to life, and that they actually haven't lost as much ground as you may have think they have. And so the trick to me becomes creating the opportunities that are available and reliable and can be counted on. Because if you start them down this street, the last thing you want to do, the crime would be to abandon them as they begin to recover. And I'm less concerned about what that form looks like than I might have been. You know, Americans tend to be very objective oriented. I'm getting into more process than object, meaning I'm sitting there eating a bowl of soup with the Dalai Lama a couple years ago.
Sorry.
In the basement.
Not a lot of people say that in the middle of a conversation.
And
I thought you were about to say now. Okay. No.
it's pretty good soup, I think.
It is.
But what inspired me is, you know, I'm sitting there in the monastery with the Dalai Lama in Wadzel, Austria, for 3 days of the symposium on spirituality. And we're there, and I spoke, and he spoke, and this and that. And I had a chemistry with this man. And he saw me, and every time he'd say, please, you sit here. And the one day of the 3 days, I was very despondent. I lost some funding. You know, my center's in trouble. I'm not sure how I'm going to make the payroll when I get back. Or I might have to lay off some good people. And I was not in a good place. And I was at that moment in my life when I said, I don't know if I haven't wasted this last 40 years. You know, I tried so hard to do something right, help a few folks along the way. I'm not sure that this was the best and most robust decision. Maybe I should think about doing something else. Well, as it turns out, I'm sitting with His Holiness, the two of us, and we're eating, and this guy is super sensitive. And he saw me, and he felt me. And he looked at me, and I'll go to my grave. He communicated to me in his glance that I was not alone in my journey, that he was with me in this journey. Honest to God, man. It was right. And, you know, that's what you got to do with other people. You know, we have an obligation to hang with people for this life. It's difficult to get through this by yourself. And these guys have been hurt, and brutalized, and they need you to be the strong guy to carry them through. And I believe that we have an obligation to each other to do a version of this because we all desperately need it. And I'm thinking, here's this guy, the Dalai Lama, man. The guy is born into the world. He never has a date. He never gets a drink. He never goes to the amusement park, right? And he's been saddled with the burden of his people, and he doesn't even have a country, and the Chinese are trying to kill him. And he's saying to me, I am with you on your journey, right? Cool.
Bill, what Bill is saying, I know. What Bill is saying, there's this other piece to this, right? So what you were saying, Bill, about people are hurting and we have to walk with them, is important. It's the thing. It is the thing. There's another piece of it that you weren't saying and that I was hearing, because freedom of interpretation, that I think is so important as well. And that is, we have got to love our prophets. We have got to love and support our prophets, right? In that moment, you were the prophet lost in the wilderness, and another prophet understood where you were, and he loved you because he understood what it was like to be alone in that wilderness. And most of us are not prophets, right? And most of us live in a world that is made better by those who are. And being a prophet is the hardest, scariest, loneliest path imaginable, right? And we have prophets out there. I'll give you 10 in Boston, right? We have prophets out there, and it drives me nuts that they spend as much time as they do trying to change the world and feeling alone. How is it that we're letting them feel alone? How is it that we are letting them feel alone? We have got to love our prophets. And every one of us at some point in our lives meets a prophet, right? And I'm using all small p, right? Although if you meet a big P and have soup with him, more power to you. That's a good day.
Yeah.
But most of us are going to meet small p prophets. But it is insane that the small p prophets out there spend as much time running counterculture and feeling alone and like they don't have what they need to change the world. And we're okay with that. And we got to love our prophets.
Yeah, I always tell my wife when we watch TV together at home, when I see someone crying on TV, I say, if that was me, I wouldn't cry on TV. I can't see how they would be on national TV and crying. But as we're streaming, I hope the watery eyes that I'm getting sitting here listening to this conversation doesn't show up on. It's not national TV, but I said I wouldn't cry on TV. But I'm not gonna lie. And some of you guys had glassy eyes. I looked away. It wasn't just me. Y'all was feeling it too, so it wasn't just me. I'm just saying. We are coming to the end of our time. Damon Cox being one of those guys with glassy eyes. Just he's pretty tough, but he was crying. I want to just have you guys leave us with one final thought as we leave our conversation and go off into the world. And I think we've got a bag full of nuggets and wisdom, and I feel like my pockets are filled with all this wisdom that I've gotten from this, and this the application of that wisdom. I'm going to see if I could do it, and I'm going to try my best. What are some parting words that you have around our own journeys in rising? What can we take from this conversation as we think about our own journey in rising and the way that we make ourselves and our way through the world with other people? What are some final thoughts that the two of you have?
I'm panicking a little bit, trying to think of what I would say in answer to that.
Well, I'll go first.
Thank you.
At the end of this experience called life, all you have are your memories. There are two possibilities, since we all know that there's a finalness to this experience. We don't know when, but we certainly know that it will happen. So the real question is, what are you going to do between now and then? And I've sort of visualized this out in the future and say, all right, since that part's non-negotiable, you only have two possibilities. You can leave out of here with no dreams, or you can leave out of here with a lifetime full of dreams. And at the last moment of your life, what's it going to be? You can be the guy, you know, the horrible human being who destroyed lives and destroyed himself in the process, and so you leave out of here with a blank slate and no memories. Or you can elect to leave out of here on a high note with 1,000,000 memories. I view these experiences every day as accumulating my memory bank, so that I am absolutely certain of the moment of my departure that I didn't waste this time or waste the oxygen. That I played this hand out, and I can leave out of here with my head up, and I did my part as a human being.
Thank you, actually. That actually really helped me. So what I kept thinking several times as Bill was talking, that what I was having the pleasure of being present for was a whole person, right? And I was hearing the wisdom of a whole person. And so, and as you talk about, it comes right up until the moment you die, right? That's life's work, right? You're talking about a lifetime's worth of work. And I think being a whole person is a life's work. And I think my parting thought would be, poverty is in the places where we can't be whole people. And we think about monetary poverty a lot. And it's criminal, the extent to which we don't create conditions where people have the ability, if they want to be, to express themselves as whole people. It is the greatest moral crisis of our time, that we do not, with what we know and with the resources that we have, that we do not create the conditions for people to be whole people, right? Then it's on them. It's right. It's on each of us to make the tough choices in life to be a whole person. But if we want to be, it's a moral crisis if we can't, if we cannot express ourselves wholly. So, but there are other kinds of poverty than economic poverty. There's spiritual poverty. There's emotional poverty. There's poverty of love and understanding. And it's those forms of poverty that drive us to economic poverty over time. And my parting thought would be to understand poverty as the lack of ability to be a whole person. And when we understand that, we stop demonizing the other and understand it as a shared experience and one that we can work on together.
Thank you.
For you. Thank you so much for participating. Tiziana, this one is for
I get one, even though I work here.
Thank you all for being here today. When you signed in, we had a survey. If you wouldn't mind, please filling out that survey. Most of you are here, which means that you are on our email list. If you're not on our email list, we have a fabulous group of leaders who can take your name on your way out. So we can make sure that we invite you to other Boston Rising events, other conversations, and have a different experience in our Boston Rising universe and our Boston Rising family. Thank you all for being here today. Hopefully we'll see you next month at our next conversation. Have a good day.
Thank you.